Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Steven Inks, and in today's episode we're looking at the HongDian N8. And not just the HongDian N8, but a very particular special nib that it has, which is known as the long knife nib. You may have seen listings for this kind of pen with this sort of nib before, wondered what it was about. I personally wondered as well, so I picked one up. We're going to check it out, we're going to make some test lines with it, see what it can do, and I'm going to give you my overall thoughts after drawing with it for a little bit. Let's check it out. It's pen time. Here we go. I could tell already what this is going to look like. I've seen this in a lot of pens lately. This metal steel tin case. I don't see big bumps on the inside, which is a positive for me because that means that maybe it wasn't improperly loaded. We'll see what it looks like though. Ooh, here we go. Okay. So little plastic sleeve out. Nice foam rubber as opposed to the sort of cheap foam that it normally comes in. So they really took the time to protect this guy. Here we go. Nice little maple leaf. You can also feel a slight texture on the outside. So it doesn't feel like it's printed in that sense. It kind of feels like it's etched in there, which feels good. There's a maple leaf finial. I love a good finial with a little bit of flair to it. Gold clip. Feels stiff. Quite stiff, actually. But it definitely has a little bit of give to it. It doesn't feel weak or cheap in that sense. So opening it up. Okay. The body's really thick. It's kind of chunky. Some people like that, some people don't, just so you're aware. This feels on the level with my Conklin All-American, probably a bit thinner than that, but the section definitely feels about the same. I do like the nib. Have a look at the detail here. There's a nice little etching on the side there. It's got that two-toned action, which is really cool. A pagoda of some kind. And this is what's known as a long knife nib. Let's see if I can get a little more focus here. Okay. As you can see, it's sort of a form of calligraphy nib. You can see that it looks very thin and tight in the front, but then if you look at the underside, you've got this sort of jutting out bump, less pronounced than an architect nib. Architect nib would be on the top and the bottom there, but this looks like a regular nib from the top, a little bit of flare on the bottom. Curious what that might draw like, and we're gonna find out. But looking at the inside, oh, we got a rubber O-ring right there, so you can see that is gonna give it a nice tight closure. Very good. Squeaky nib, or squeaky section there. Got a little bit of the threads seem to have scraped a little bit when I was removing that part, so that's not ideal. I don't really like metal on plastic or resin threads. I feel like that's a disaster waiting to happen. But there's a lot of pens that do that, and so far they all work for me. I just I'm worried about the future. So nice little converter. It has this kind of frosted plastic feel, which feels very nice. Oh, it does come apart completely, which is going to be great for cleaning it. Got a little ball bearing in the body there, and that is for breaking up surface tension of ink. That kind of keeps your ink from getting stuck inside of the converter, and you can hear that. You can actually shake it if you're having trouble with your flow. So that's nice to have. Let's see if this section comes off. Oh yeah. Okay, so it's a twisted section right here. I'm just curious if this will fit into my other pen, so I'm going to grab one real quick. Don't go anywhere. There we go. Alright, this is my my HongDian Black Forest, and it has a fude nib in it. Probably my favorite of all the ones that I've used. I've used about 4 or 5 different brands, and this one's probably my favorite. Okay, it's already looking not great because those threads aren't quite lined up, but let's just see what happens if I... Oh no, very different. Okay, interesting. So this is the first HongDian I have where the nib seems to be quite larger. I think it looks nice, but just so you know that this is not going to be compatible with the other HongDian pens that I've reviewed on this channel. There may be some other ones where this does match up, but it's not universal. So we're gonna put this together and put some ink in it, and then we're gonna make some lines. Yeah, it's gonna be another favorite from my collection, Noodler's Nightshade. This is a very popular ink to look at. I always get comments, what ink is that? When I use this color, it's sort of a dusty, almost blood kind of brown red. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a lovely one. I will say, though, one of the reasons why I don't use it as much as I would like to is that it takes a very long time to dry. So I have to be very careful because I'm left-handed. So this guy and this guy do not often get along. We'll see what happens. Here we go. I'm going to drop in. And converter pens, just in case you're new to fountain pens, you would typically depress them all the way down by rotating along the side, and then when you drop it into the ink, you pull up and you'll get a fill. If you'd like to fill the converter more fully, you would push it down again and pull it up again, and that gives you a little bit more. Never perfect, but I don't require perfection. All right, pulling up. Okay, so we got about halfway full. It looks like it's less than halfway full, but part of that section of the converter is actually depressed into the pen, so it's where you get about halfway. All right, and you can see doing it a second time yielded more ink. And we're ready to clean this nib off and go for our line samples. Okay, here we are, ready to try some lines out. We're going to start with the downstroke. I have a feeling the downstroke and the side stroke are going to be different for these pens. So, okay, pretty typical fountain pen line on the side stroke. It's very wet. If you could see what we've got here, we've got a little bit of feathering. This is cheap paper. Sometimes it feathers with really wet flow. But not too bad, so definitely usable. And let's do a side stroke here. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you're dealing with a front stroke that's typical fountain pen, a side stroke that's more like it's maybe even like a broad or a double broad, but a little bit drier than that because those pens tend to have really wet flow. And then if we're looking at reverse writing, okay, very nice and smooth reverse writing. So this is forward. It's fun to write with. This is side. And I'm just going to do this here. This is reverse. And I'm going to say smooth all around, which is nice. What does a scribble look like? Okay, when you're scribbling side to side, you tend to get the broader edge of the of the nib, it looks like. So we've got, it looks more in line with the side scroll. So that's what we're gonna get a lot of. It's gonna be a high level, okay? You can scribble, it's definitely a bit scratchy when you scribble in reverse writing, but that's not uncommon. That's kind of usual. I feel like I can't even fault the pen for that, because who's doing these scribbly lines reverse writing? Reverse writing is typically just a quick line when you need to put something in. That doesn't fit. And it's a nice it's not a super dry, scratchy reverse writing line. It feels like you could do this for quite some time if you needed to. I do feel, though, if you're spending all your time doing reverse writing, you probably just want a finer lined pen. It's most of your drawing and your lines should fall within these two categories somewhat. Otherwise, you probably have the wrong pen. But let's do an outside line here, some shapes, and I'm just gonna see if I can follow this all the way. Oh yeah, it's very easy to get that that outside line, and then on the inside we have this, following that straight line. So you may have to angle with your fingers a little bit, kind of like you're steering a ship, to get that to do what you might want it to do. I'm curious if I'm doing a circle. Well, this is a very strange circle. Getting the outside of that is gonna make me do it in steps. It's not the worst circle I've done, I'm sorry to admit. Let's do a cylinder today. Yeah. So, I often do a pyramid or a circular cone, but similar shading patterns follow with the cone versus this. So if we're just doing like lines, oh, it comes on really smooth. It's wet, but it's not so wet that I don't feel like I can work with it. Like I can put lines in that work well for me. And I can still block in deep shadows. I'll try that with one of the other shapes. But these lines are kind of fun. I could definitely see a stylistic shift if I ever wanted to do something that had a certain style to it. I feel like if regular fountain pens are working for you, maybe you don't need something like this. Same thing with the Fude nib or the like the Architect nib, which isn't a great nib for drawing as I personally feel. But if you're looking for a change, you're willing to put the work into learning how this works. And it honestly is going pretty easy for me. I don't find myself struggling to figure out how to make good lines with it, which is what I did when I had the Architect nib. And the Fude nib, I feel, requires even more kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Time to build that muscle memory for how to use it properly. But this is a little bit of the in-between of those two extremes of the kind of typical nib. And I'm finding myself enjoying this side stroke. If you're noticing, I'm doing a lot of the side stroke. Yeah, this is pretty fun to draw with. Let me see if I can do some typical hatching over here, and what does that feel like? I'm going pretty fast through this, so I wouldn't be surprised if you can do better yourself at home. And maybe that's a good thing. You don't necessarily want to have somebody just completely blow you out of the water with their skills, and then you don't know how it would feel if you were using it, if you're still building those skills. So, if you think I'm a bad artist, I'm doing it on purpose. That's silly. Okay. So yeah, you can still get some pretty nice stuff here. I do notice though, this part where I've gone over it a couple of times, let's just look in there. I see a sort of a bloom of ink right there. And just checking to see, no, it didn't bleed through, but I definitely think I would tear that paper into pieces if I were to try super hard. I'm gonna do a little, I don't normally do this, but since this is a kind of a wet writer, I'm gonna do a little smear test. So this is 10 seconds. Oh. And this is 20 seconds. Still a little bit wet right here in this region. So let me try 30 seconds. It's going to take a little bit of time for me to figure out. But I think it feels like everything I wrote here is already dried. So that's actually pretty good for an ink like this. Doesn't dry very well. I want to say I've got about 10 seconds left. Okay, very little smudge. Just you can kind of see it, but you could also not notice it if it's right in the middle of something. The camera doesn't even really pick it up. I can see a little smudge here, but it's not bad. So 25 to 30 seconds, you're pretty good to go. Let's talk some art advice before we go. And for art advice today, I've kind of given this advice a couple of times before, I'm pretty sure. But I give it in many different ways. Proportion is more important than details. So if you're not good at rendering and you're trying to do, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something like a rhinoceros is the only thing I could think of. If I'm doing this rhinoceros, and he looks like this, and he's kind of, maybe even a little bit cartoony. But I've done my research, and it's been a while since I've drawn a rhino, so if you're like a rhinoceros expert, then I do apologize. And then I've got this rhinoceros, and that seems to work okay. I'm paying attention as I'm looking at, I think there's another horn right here, as I'm looking at a picture of a rhinoceros to learn the proportions. If I were to go and make that, the eyes are too big, but then I really go into the details and I get like all of this going on, and I'm rendering and I'm going into the small parts of it, and I'm really focusing on rendering in detail, but I got the proportions wrong. People aren't gonna really know what it is that I'm doing. So what's the point of going into all that detail? Which one looks more like a rhinoceros? Well, probably the one that has the outline and the shape of the rhinoceros rather than one where we didn't pay attention to the proportion. So something to think about. Focus on the shapes and their relationship to each other rather than getting into the weeds with details, and that part will come as soon as you got this part down. All right, let's draw a little bit. In drawing with this nib, I did find it a little bit uncomfortable for my art style. I think it's something I would adjust to, but I feel like it really hurt this piece. I went back and did a rhino again because I felt like that drawing sample that I did of a rhino, which I wasn't actually looking at reference, could definitely have used a second look, shall we say. So hopefully this one looks a little bit better. Always use reference, kids. And I found again that the pen does work very well. I found myself using the reverse writing a lot more than I wanted to, and just kind of like I said, if you're constantly using the reverse writing, maybe another nib is going to be a better bet for you. So In truth, I do feel that it was a little bit of an uncomfortable experience, but it's still a very good nib, and I think that a lot of people will find it valuable. So I'd like to come back and swing around for a second look at this at some point in time, just to kind of see if I warm up to it a little bit. But it was sort of a rough and interesting move for my first time with this nib. So for final thoughts, in all honesty, I do think that the long knife nib is a very interesting nib idea. As a drawing tool, I think you have to be very conscious of the angle at which you're putting the pen. Many of us have a comfortable angle which we view for drawing lines, and so particularly nibs like this tend to be difficult to manage, and I found that true of myself as well. But I think if you're looking for a change or a nib with a little bit of character to it, and you don't mind a wet writer or line maker, you might find this to be a really great drawing tool for you. I think it's interesting. I'll definitely be using it more, but it has a learning curve, much like the Architect nib and the Fude nib. You're going to find yourself changing the angle of drawing, which may be uncomfortable for some. That being said, the N8 is a beautiful pen. It's a very sturdy build, and you can get this pen in all the other typical nibs that you can get a HongDian pen in, like extra fine, fine, medium nibs, stuff like that. So if you like the pen itself, pick it up with a different nib. If you like the pen and the nib combo, definitely check it out. I had a good experience with them both. That being said, that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you found this content valuable, and check out my website, steveninks.com, where you can download a free book that I wrote about choosing a pen for yourself and your art style. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.